What is meant by the term good? The term good in an ethical context is interpreted differently by different thinkers. According to one view, called ethical naturalism, the ethical term good can be translated into non-ethical without any change in meaning. For example, when I say that it is good to help others in need, it means I approve of it. But in such a ease, I am not saying anything about the property of the act, but rather I am expressing my attitude of approval towards it. If we accept such a definition of good or right, then no acts are right or wrong, good or bad in themselves. There are only favorable or unfavorable attitudes held by people. In actual practice, people generally follow a reverse procedure. They approve certain acts because they are good or right, contrarily they are not right, because they have been approved by these people. Approval or non-approval of certain act expresses only attitudes of favorableness or unfavorableness. It is not a condition of goodness or badness, rightness or wrongness. Even if people approve certain acts as good or right, it does not follow that the right act is necessarily right. The majority's view may be mistaken. According to the utilitarian view, any act is good if it promotes or tends to promote maximum happiness to the maximum number of people in the long run. The utilitarian definition has, however, some merit, because it attempts to define in terms of the consequences it produces. One essential feature of consequentialism or teleological theories is that it gives good priority over the right. The term good is defined as the end or the objective of human action, greatest happiness of greatest number. This view evaluates moral actions in terms of whether they contribute to the good. The results, consequences, determine the rightness or wrongness of actions. There are other deontological theories, which argue the priority of the right over the good. Actions are intrinsically right or wrong without any regard to the consequences they happen to produce. In short, certain actions are intrinsically good or bad, right or wrong. The goodness or badness does not depend on the consequences they produce. For example, if I perform my duty with sincerity, I should not bother about what might be the consequences. What kinds of things are good? In this unit, we shall focus on the question, what kinds of things are good? In this regard, at least one thing is certain, and this is that there would be no judgments about what is good and bad, if people do not value certain things above others. In the simplest sense, one values something if he likes or he prefers it to something else. The word value can be interpreted in another sense also. Something may be of value to someone even though one does not prefer it. For example, one's health may be of value to him, her, even though he acts in such a way as to undermine or destroy it. Studying is of value to students, though some students' preference is hot studying. Whatever is of value to you in the attainment of goal is not necessarily what you prefer. That which one values, subjectively, is one thing, and that which is of value, objectively, is another. So value is considered in two senses, a liking or a preference, and that which promotes a goal independently of one's liking or preference. Secondly, things which are of value in a particular context may vary from one individual to another. Now the question is, are all such things valuable in themselves? Some things are valuable as means to attainment of certain other things, that is, they are means to some ends. Proper or balanced diet is a means to good health. Health may be valuable to attainment of something like happiness or peace of mind. So in the objective sense, value is the means to some end, as a necessary condition. Here again a question arises: are there things which are of value in themselves regardless of what we are aiming at? Or is it always relative to some end? That which has value or worth in itself without reference to any end, or that which has value as a means to the attainment of an end? Some philosophers have answered this question in the affirmative, i.e., there are things which are valuable in themselves and also there are things which are valuable as means to some further end. These two concepts are more clearly discussed as under intrinsic and instrumental good. Something in this world are valuable, desirable, worthwhile, i.e., good for their own sake, whereas other things are good only as means to some ends. They are security, peace, pleasure, money, enjoyment, happiness, knowledge, honesty, kindness, intelligence, affection, beauty, etc., which are worth having or desirable. But some of these are desirable for their own sake and others are means to something that are desirable for their own sake. For example, money is good only as a means to some other things like material comfort, freedom from certain fears, happiness and peace. But are all these things that money brings worth having for their own sake? Surely no. Then, why do we want these things? Perhaps, to bring happiness, that is something that we desire for its own sake. Happiness is intrinsically good. Thus intrinsic value is the ethical thing that an object has in itself or for its own sake. An object with intrinsic value may be regarded as an end or end in itself. It is contrasted with instrumental value, or extrinsic value, the value of which depends on how much it generates intrinsic value. Difference between pleasure and happiness. What is the difference between these two terms? Pleasure is a certain kind of consciousness, not verbally definable, a psychological state, with which we are all acquainted from our experiences. We speak of pleasure of eating, drinking, sexual experience, taking a walk in the morning, reading a book, contemplating works of arts, listening to music, engaging in conversation with friends, etc. All these things are sources of pleasure. Pleasure may be physical such as eating, drinking, sexual experience, or it may be mental and spiritual. Happiness and pleasure are not synonymous terms. We may experience pleasure for a few seconds, but it would be strange to speak of being happy for a few seconds. The relation of pleasure and happiness is like that of part and the whole. Happiness consists of the sum of pleasures. A person may experience numerous pleasures without being happy, but he cannot be happy without experiencing pleasure from some source or other. Sources of pleasure, of course, count much more towards happiness than do others. One's healthy attitude towards life and cheerful disposition are much more conducive to happiness than striving for wealth and glamour. Hedonism. Hedonism as a normative ethical philosophy means that pleasure and happiness constitute ultimate good. In other words, it can be said that something is normally good or right if it promotes or tends to promote maximum happiness to the maximum number of people in the long run. According to the philosophy of hedonism, only that pleasure is intrinsically good, that is, worth having for its own sake. On the basis of this theory, the more pleasure and happiness are in the world, the better it is. Life containing the most intrinsic good is the one that contains maximum pleasure and the least displeasure. According to the hedonist, pleasure and happiness are intrinsically good. There are many things that the hedonist would consider good, but only pleasure and happiness are considered intrinsically good. For example, works of art are good in that they provide the possibility of pleasant aesthetic experiences. They are sometimes said to have a special kind of inherent value, since the contemplation of them is itself pleasant. Bricks and mortar, by contrast, do not have inherent value, because the very contemplation of them is not itself pleasant. They have instrumental value, in that they have a utility for human purpose, such as building houses, which in turn lead to happiness. Anything that is usable for furtherance of happiness is instrumentally good. Among the things that are instrumentally good, in the hedonistic sense, are moral qualities or virtues: honesty, benevolence, truth, non-stealing, industriousness, and so on. In general, moral qualities are those that tend to make one and all better human beings, though it is difficult to make a sharp distinction between moral and non-moral qualities. For example, can we treat thrift, tidiness, courage, etc. as moral qualities? Courage, for example, may not be good in itself, but only when it leads to happiness in the world, its moral value is increased. Similar is the case with honesty. It is good, but not good in itself. Acquisition of knowledge is in general good, but it can also be evil depending upon the purpose for which it is used. In any case, when it is good, its goodness is only instrumental. Knowledge that adds to the sum of happiness is good. Knowledge of the principles of physics is of enormous value in human life, yet hydrogen and other atomic bombs are also made with its knowledge, which can annihilate human life from the globe. Happiness also is not good without conditions. Happiness of a criminal who gets away with his crime or of person who wins a contest by cheating do not involve anything good. Ethical pluralism. We have seen that according to hedonism, pleasure or happiness is intrinsically good. Other thinkers who are critical of hedonism also don't deny this view, but at the same time they accept other things also as intrinsically good. Let us discuss these also. Knowledge. There is no doubt that knowledge is good. Knowledge is power and it is an instrument in the advancement of human civilization. It is also used as an instrument of human happiness and pleasure. If you know that certain disease is contagious, you can avoid getting exposed to it by taking precautions. Notwithstanding the instrumental use of knowledge, it is claimed to be good for its own sake. We study philosophy, mathematics, or any other subject like physics or biology to acquire knowledge and not with the objective that this knowledge will add to world's happiness. Many people including the hedonists are not convinced about the argument about knowledge for its intrinsic worth. They say that though it is good to have knowledge, its value is instrumental and not inherent like happiness or liberty. Arguing against knowledge as inherent good, they hold that when knowledge is good, it is only instrumentally good and also not under all circumstances. There are many cases where true knowledge is concealed from persons suffering from diseases, to save them from frustration, anguish or anxiety. And there are conditions, circumstances in which knowledge far from being an intrinsic value is not a value at all. So according to hedonism it is happiness, which is intrinsically good and not knowledge. The goodness of knowledge depends on its happiness potential. Moral qualities. Against the hedonistic view proclaiming that it is happiness alone that is intrinsically good, the pluralists posit a number of moral qualities of human beings as having intrinsic worth. According to them, qualities like kindness, honesty, truthfulness, benevolence, loyalty, generosity, goodwill, etc. are valuable in themselves. But the hedonists' arguments against the intrinsic worth of such qualities comment that such qualities are valuable only as means to bring more happiness in the world and hence their values are instrumental. Indeed, all these qualities can be used for either good or evil. They are not always instrumentally good. Loyalty, honesty and generosity are evil when used for a bad cause as exemplified by fanatics' loyalty to their party, and ready to slaughter thousands of people rather than give up the beliefs. A person who is generous to lazy people, his generosity shown will add more to their laziness. Similarly, if a doctor tells truth to a patient who suffers from some incurable disease, it will do more harm to the patient than good. The pluralists, however, attach intrinsic values to these qualities even when they have bad consequences. For them, values are more important than the happiness they cause. The hedonists' counterargument is that though a world without moral virtues is not worth living, still their values are instrumental. If virtues are deleted from the goal of happiness in which the instrumental values reside, then one is faced with questions like, what are all these virtues for? Why cultivate them at all? What end do they serve? The pluralists are of the view that happiness obtained by wrongful means cannot be sustained for long. On the other hand, happiness achieved by exercise of moral qualities is abiding, deep and more self-satisfying. The exercise of desirable human traits is not merely an instrument for the achievement of greater human happiness. These traits are desirable in themselves and people usually value them for themselves. The more kindness, fairness, generosity, goodwill, wisdom, etc. prevail in the world, the better becomes the place. The exercise of moral virtues is thus not merely instrumental to the achievement of happiness, but has a value of its own, independent of its happiness potential. Self-realization. The term self-realization has been used to indicate two kinds of growth in awareness, of expansion of consciousness, which although more or less related, are different in their nature and have quite different manifestations. The meaning most frequently given to self-realization is that of psychological growth and maturation, of the awakening and manifestation of latent potentialities of the human being, for instance, ethical, aesthetic, and religious experiences and activities. These correspond to the characteristics Maslow, 1959, ascribes to self-actualization, and it would perhaps be well to use this term in order to distinguish it from the second kind of self-realization. This is the realization of the self, the experience and awareness of the synthesizing spiritual center. It is not the realization of the personal conscious self or I, which should be considered merely as the reflection of the spiritual self, in the field of the personality. Self-actualization may be achieved at different levels and does not necessarily include what can be called the spiritual level. According to the view of the proponents of self-realization, the only thing that is good for its own sake is the development of man's best capacities as human beings. Man is endowed with different capacities, proper realization of which led to full human development. Man is often unable to realize these to the full. As a result, most of these, which could have added to her human growth, remain underdeveloped. It should be remembered that man possesses both human and animal instincts, potentialities. When we refer to self-realization, we mean human qualities and capacities mentioned above under the section, moral qualities, like generosity, truth, non-violence, physical, moral and intellectual abilities and skills, etc. Aristotle, speaking on such qualities, had opined that exercising one's best capacities meant exercising the capacity that is unique to man and the rational faculty or reason. Man shares many of his capacities for growth with animals, but capacities like reason and morality are such faculties that he shares with no other species. It is such unique faculties that should be realized. The biological capacities are to be realized along with the uniquely human faculties, but they should be subordinated to capacities like reason and morality. Man's reason should control all his other capacities and capabilities. There is no doubt that man has a right to his self-existence like all other animals. All living species except man are programmed by nature to perform actions required for their survival. It is man alone who has capacities to choose a value, action that he thinks is appropriate to his survival. Choosing a code of values is uniquely human. Man's life is based on the code of ethics. But for individual man, his own life is his purpose. Thus, in this system of ethics, man's life is the ultimate value that all other values serve, including happiness. This is the one thing that is an end in itself. But a question arises: will it be wrong for a man ever to risk his life? Not at all. For instance, if a man is compelled to live in such human conditions where freedom of thought and actions are suppressed, he might very well risk his life to escape such conditions. A more recent doctrine, close in some respects to self-realization, is contained in the ethical theory given by philosopher and novelist Ayn Rand. According to this view, good is that which is proper, appropriate, conducive to the life of man as a rational being. Ayn Rand's ethics begins by analysis of the term value. She maintains, values arise from and are necessitated by the distinctive nature of living beings. Value is that which one prefers and is an object of action, which presupposes alternatives. You value an object or thing, which you prefer and choose from alternatives for which action is necessary. If you reflect upon different alternatives, you will see that the most fundamental alternative in the universe is existence or non-existence, the issue of life or death. It is the concept of life that makes the concept of other values possible. It is only to a living person that things can be good or evil. Thus it is existence, nature and the needs of living organisms that make the existence of values possible and necessary. Man is not born with automatic, innate knowledge of what is good or evil for him. To acquire this knowledge, man must think, and to think is an act of choice. That is, if man is to live, he must choose to think and hold life as his standard of value. The code of values that his life requires is a code of ethics.